Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this wreath using art brushes I create in Adobe Illustrator. Now there are a lot of different brushes in Illustrator, but the art brush is really simple to make, and as you can see from this wreath, you can end up with some lovely results. Before we go any further, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my future tutorials, and click on the bell so you'll get notified when I have a new video. All right, let's move to a document that I've already set up. I've created some leaves and some branches for us. We're going to be using black and white in this video, but you can use color just as easily. When I do black and white, I'm usually doing this for clip art or for coloring sheets, and so I make sure that I have a white fill in all of my objects so that if I layer one brush or one object on top of another, it doesn't show through. Also, I created these branches quite a bit bigger because it's easier to draw them when they're larger, and then I reduced them down to the sizes you see here so they'd be the right size for our wreath. It's really easy to actually make an art brush, but the first thing you have to do is have the brushes panel accessible. So I'll come up to Window, down to Brushes, and I'll click here, and I'm going to just click and hold on the Brushes tab, and I'm going to drag and drop it over next to the Layers panel inside this right side of my artboard. Then I'll close the swatches and symbols, and I don't need libraries for this video, so I'm going to click on the tab, drag it over to the artboard, and we'll close that out. Now, the brushes panel comes with several brushes already, but I don't need these, so I'm going to select them, hold down the Shift key, and I have to leave basic. You can't delete that. And I'm going to come down and click on the little trash can at the bottom and delete those just to get them out of the way. And we're going to start with this long skinny leaf here. I'll select it, and then to make an art brush out of it, I come over to the Brushes panel, and down at the bottom there's a little icon. It's a square with a plus sign in it. That's the new brush icon, and I'll click here, and that opens up the new brush dialog box. And I can choose any of these brushes, but for the purpose of this video, we'll choose Art Brush and say OK. Now this opens up the Art Brush Options dialog box, and this is where we make all of our choices. The first thing I do is give my brush a name, and I'm going to call this Skinny Leaf. I name my art brushes, especially if I'm making more than one, so that I can easily distinguish between any of them that might look similar. Our first choice is width, and the default setting is fixed. You can click on the little arrow and reveal a pull-down menu, and there are some other options, which some of them will require you to have a pad and be drawing with an electronic pen. Others, I'm going to let you just experiment with these on your own. They'll make different shapes out of your art brushes. We'll just leave this on fixed. Our next choice is what kind of brush scale option do we want to choose. The default setting is stretch to fit stroke length. When this is chosen, Illustrator stretches this design the full length of whatever size stroke I create. If it's 15 inches long, it's going to stretch the design 15 inches. Let me show you. I'll say OK here. We'll get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and I'm going to create a really long stroke, and Illustrator has stretched the design the full length of the stroke. Now if I decide that's not what I want, I can change that by coming back over to the Brushes panel. Here's my skinny leaf. I'm going to double click it, and that opens up the Art Brush Options dialog box again. So another choice we could make is scale proportionately. With this choice, Illustrator is also going to completely fill the stroke, but it's enlarging the leaf, and so it's going to increase the weight of the stroke proportionately to how much it's increased the design. And when I choose this, you can see that I end up with quite a different result. This is usually not something that I want in my art brush, so most of the time I'll leave the default setting alone. Now there is one other option though that can be helpful in some instances, and that is stretch between the guides. When I choose this, you can see there's something different happening in the preview pane. I have dotted lines on both the left side of my design and the right side of the design. Now, when the stretch between guides is chosen, again, Illustrator is going to stretch the art brush the full length of the stroke, but I can tell it what part to stretch. So I can grab hold of the line and I can drag it over, and right now I'm going to place it where only the stem is stretched, and you can see, because I have preview checked, that Illustrator has kept the size of the leaf and stretched my stem. Now if I wanted to stretch part of the leaf itself, I can just grab this and move it to the right, and then you see the leaf has gotten larger. I can also use these start and end points and just move like this. And here, when I have the leaf part being stretched and I say OK, I'm going to apply this change to the strokes. The leaf is stretched almost the full length of this stroke. Well, that's not what I want, so I'm going to come back, double click my brush, and I'm going to just go back to stretch to fit the stroke length. Next, we have the direction, and the default setting is left to right. You can see I have this little line going through my design with an arrow on the end. So when I begin to draw this on the artboard, the first thing that's going to be drawn is the stem, and I'm going to draw up to the top of the leaf. Now if I wanted to draw the other way, all I have to do is change the direction, and here when I begin to draw the brush, it's going to start with the end of the leaf and it's going to move down to the stem. The other two options, the up arrow and the down arrow, I'll just show you. If I was drawing this way, well, it wouldn't really be very practical for a leaf design. And I'm going to just leave this at left to right because I like to start with the stem part of my leaf. Next choice we have to make is colorization. The default setting is none, and when this is left at none, you can't change the stroke or the fill of your art brush. You're going to end up with black and white if you start with black and white. But I do have some other choices. I can go to this little pull down menu here, and the next choice I have is tints. And if I choose tints, I'm able to change the stroke color of my design by changing the stroke color in the properties panel. Let's click OK, apply this to strokes, and let's select our art brush and come over to the properties panel, and I'll change the stroke color to green, and I'm going to go ahead and change the fill color to green as well. And you can see what's happened. Illustrator did add a fill color, but it's outside of the design, and that's definitely not what we want. So we're going to change that fill color back to no fill, and I'll click on the artboard here, and you can see that I do have a green stroke now instead of the black stroke. All right, let's come back to the brushes panel, and we'll double click on the art brush. I have two more choices to make. Tints and shades is used when you're working with tonal color artwork, and we're not going to get into that in this video. Hue shift is the last choice, and when I choose hue shift, Illustrator is going to apply a hue of the stroke color that we created. Now remember, we have a green stroke here, so Illustrator is giving it a green hue in the fill, and I'll show you how that works. We're going to apply to strokes, come to the properties panel, I'll select the brush, and we'll change the stroke to pink. And you'll see I don't have the exact color of pink that I chose. It is a hue of the pink. And sometimes you might find that useful. We're going to just go ahead and go back and change this to tints. Then we'll come down here and look at these options. The first one is flip along, which is going to flip the direction of your art brush. You can see that it's now going the other direction. And then if I do flip across, in this particular example, you don't see any difference because we have a symmetrical design. So it's when it flips side to side, you really can't tell any difference. Then our last choice is overlap. The default setting here is the right icon, and this is telling Illustrator to adjust the corners and the folds so that you don't have an overlap. And that's what you want to leave selected most of the time, and let me show you why. We're going to select this other icon, which tells Illustrator not to adjust the corners and the folds. And I'll say OK and apply this to strokes. I'm going to go ahead and delete this design. Then I'm going to get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and I'm going to draw out a bent leaf. And here, even though I have a white fill, I'm seeing this overlap, and I don't want to see that. So I'm going to come back, double click on the art brush, and change this setting to adjust the corners. And when I do, I have a perfect bend here, and that's what we want. So we're going to leave the overlap setting there. All right, I'm going to say OK and apply to strokes. And before we go any further, I'm going to come back over to the Properties panel and change this back to black. Then we'll delete our leaf, and we're going to create the rest of our art brushes. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did with the skinny leaf. I'm going to select a leaf, come over and click the new brush icon, choose art brush, say OK, and we're going to name this big leaf. And I'll change the colorization to tints and say OK. You can see here's the big leaf art brush. When I hover over these, you can see the different names. All right, let's get this branch here. Say OK, make this art brush, say OK, and we're going to call this a skinny leaf branch, and change this to tints and say OK. Now I will tell you that when I created this branch, I used this brush to create it. So I made the skinny leaf brush, then I drew out a stem, and I drew out the leaves using an art brush. So you can use an art brush to even make an art brush. All right, we'll choose this last branch here. And I'm going to name this one Round Leaf Branch and change this to Tints and say OK. And then we'll get our stems here. Name this one Skinny Stem. Change the colorization to tints, say OK, and choose this last one. Art brush, OK. Wide stem and tints and OK. So here we have all of our brushes that we're going to use for our wreath. I'll come over to the Layers panel, and I'm going to twirl down here. I'm going to hide all of my branches. I'm going to leave the rose though. I didn't make an art brush out of it because we're just going to use it individually. I'll twirl this layer closed. Then I have a template for us to use as a guide, and this is a 6-inch circle. And we're going to make our wreath layer visible, and then come over to the brushes panel, and I'll get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and I'm going to start with this wide stem. And I'm just going to weave back and forth, and I'm going to try to make this as smooth as I can. And if you end up not liking what you do, you can either fix it or delete it and create another one. So we'll look at this one here, and I kind of banged into the edge of my computer here. Let me show you how to fix this rather than starting over if you just have one spot you don't like. First of all, I need a tool that's not on the basic left toolbar. So I'm going to click on the ellipsis here, and over here in the top right corner, I'll select this and I'll choose Advanced instead of Basic. And then I'm going to come over and find the area that has the pencil tool and the smooth tool, and we'll choose the smooth tool. I've got to get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, to choose the stroke. Then we'll get the smooth tool and you just draw over this, and Illustrator smooths it out. It's such a cool little tool. Now you don't have to do this a lot because most of your wreath is going to be covered up, but if you want to do it, this is how you do it. I'll get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V, and click on the artboard to deselect it, and that looks a lot better. Now I'll get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and I'm going to go around one more time and try to kind of be opposite the other loops that I made. A wreath would not be perfect, so don't try to be perfect. There we go. I think that's going to be just fine, and I'll straighten up this one little area right here with that smooth tool. Next, we're going to use the skinny stem. I'll get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B, and select this skinny stem, and I'm going to just make a few little swirls, and I'm trying to put them in the direction of the stem where they would be growing. And if you decide you don't like one of these later, then you can just come back and delete it. Sometimes you just don't know until you get everything kind of added on. Let me add one more here. I'm not going to worry about where my stems are yet because some of this is just going to get covered over and we can fine tune this at the end. So I'll come over and get the skinny leaf branch next. I'm going to go up both sides of the wreath, and as I do, I'm going to just add these little sprigs across here. And you don't want to completely fill this wreath up yet because you're going to have a lot of other things. Let's get the round leaf brush, and I'm going to add some little sprigs and go different directions than I did with my skinny leaf. Come back over this side here. You can see how fun this is. Okay, now then let's grab this big leaf here and we'll add some leaves to this. Now there's really not a right or wrong way. You just go with what looks good. If you feel like something needs a filler, then add a leaf in. I'll get this skinny leaf now, and I'm going to add some more to this. Now I'm going to add some roses, and to do that I'm going to select the rose and I'll hold down the Option key and I'll drag a copy over here. The problem is that the rose is behind all the rest of the wreath and we want it on the front. To do that, we're going to have to change which layer it's in. And if you'd like to understand more about how layers work in Illustrator, I'm going to link a video that teaches you all about layers at the end of this video. But let's come over to the Layers panel, and I'm going to twirl down on the Branches layer. Here's my rose. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to drag it to the Wreath layer. So I just click and hold and drag it to the Wreath layer. And now you see it's at the top. So it's really important to understand about layers. Okay, I'm going to make another copy, hold down the Option key, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit, and we're going to resize this. We don't want these to be all the same. And we'll rotate this here, okay, and then hold down the Option key and we'll add another rose here. And let's put another one here and make it a little smaller and move it a little bit. Make another copy and put it up here. And I'll drag one over here, rotate it, and let's just change the size a little bit. And maybe another one here. I think I need to add another little bit right up in here. So we're going to go back to the Brushes panel, and I'm going to get this round leaf branch. I've got to get the paintbrush tool, keyboard shortcut B. I'll draw out a couple of little sprigs here, and maybe another one here. And then to balance that out, I'll add a couple more here. And you see it's just kind of a trial and error. Put it where you like it. I don't care for this one here. I'm going to undo that, keyboard shortcut Command Z. And then I'm going to get the selection tool, keyboard shortcut V. And you see where I have an end that's showing. Where I do, I'm going to just move these items around. And I won't do all of them, but I just want you to see how I do that. And that way everything looks nice and full. There's a little hole. I'm going to get this skinny leaf here and get the paintbrush tool, and we'll add a couple of little leaves here. Then I see another one here that needs to be moved. So I'll add these here. Okay, it's just very simple and fun to do, and I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to add one more right here, and then we're going to call it finished. All right, I'm going to get the type tool, keyboard shortcut T, and I'll just click here on the artboard to open that up, and I'm going to type in welcome, and then we're going to select this and move to the properties panel, and I'm going to choose al fresco, and I want this to be about 85 points. I'll say OK, and then we're going to drag this onto the wreath. Now we're going to come up and delete the rows. Then we'll come up to the layers panel and hide the template, and our wreath is finished. But I want to show you one last thing. Remember when we created the art brushes and we changed the colorization to tints? Well, I want to show you now how easy it will be to change the color of the wreath. I'm going to select all of the wreath and come over to the properties panel, and I'm going to change the stroke color here. Let's try purple. And then I'm going to click on the artboard to deselect this, and our wreath is now a lovely purple color. Then if you want to change it back, you can either go back and choose black, or I'm going to undo this, keyboard shortcut Command Z. Well, we've covered a lot of territory here, and I hope you've enjoyed learning how to make art brushes and use them in Adobe Illustrator. If you'd like to know how I made the leaves and the branches, I'm going to link a video that teaches you how to do that. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please do so right now while you're thinking about it, and click that little notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.